confrontation that could redefine the balance of power inside the United States. President Donald Trump and New York City's defiant mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani are set for their first face-to-face clash at the White House. Their visions for America's largest city could not be further apart, and the stakes could not be higher, from frozen infrastructure funding to intensified immigration enforcement. Will this be a negotiation or a showdown over who truly governs New York? And as the world leaders gather in Belém and Johannesburg, a new alarm is sounding across continents. Inequality has reached emergency levels, reshaping economies, mechanism to confront this crisis. Could 2025 become the year global governance is forced to change? This is about what power looks like inside a single city and across the entire world. I'm Hana Al-Hamalawi. You're watching In Focus. This afternoon, President Donald Trump and New York City's mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani will finally meet face-to-face at the White House, an encounter between two leaders who could not be more ideologically opposed. Mamdani, a Democratic specialist, or rather socialist, who secured a commanding victory on a platform of affordability, free public buses, universal child care, rent freezes, and government-run groceries, stepping into a high-stakes negotiation. Trump once called him a communist lunatic and threatened to withhold crucial federal funding that New York depends on. But politics isn't so linear. 10% of Trump's own voters backed Mamdani, a surprising overlap rooted in shared economic populism. The meeting follows months of political pressure from the administration, including chatter about probing Mamdani's citizenship and ramping up ICE operations in the city. Still, Mayor frames the moment as an opportunity. He said, "I will stand up for New Yorkers every single day." Trump, meanwhile, insists that he still loves New York. So, can two political enemies find common ground for a city in crisis? Well, to answer this question, we're joined by Mr. P.L. De Silva, political science professor, to try to unpack all this issue. Professor, how significant is this meeting in terms of shaping New York-Washington relations under Trump's presidency?
Well, we have to wait and see the outcome. There are probably three outcomes. There could be a cooperative breakthrough where things will be, federal local relations will be okay. The other would be a stalemate, but it'll be cordial. And the third option is a breakdown and a public confrontation. All three possibilities are there on the table. We have to see how it kind of plays out.
Oh, well, Mamdani ran on a transformative economic agenda. So do you see any areas where Trump might be compelled to compromise?
Well, Trump is already compromising after Mamdani's victory. He has cut all the tariffs on Brazilian beef and coffee because it's untenable in the supermarkets how groceries are sky high. And Trump campaigned that he would bring prices down, and his tariffs have actually had a blowback effect. So he is trying to scramble after Mamdani's victory because Mamdani campaigned on affordability and economic security.
Trump's base largely disapproves of New York's politics, yet Some of his supporters still backed Mamdani. How do we explain that convergence?
The thing is this, it's the young people, okay? A massive number of young people who actively canvassed for Mamdani, and which led to his victory. What would they say? 100,000 volunteers. So, if that is the case, then there's a clear difference between the old guard, the old corrupt ancien regime, of which Trump belongs to. He's 79 years old. He's going to be 80 years old in June. Mamdani is 34 years old, and there's a 45-year age gap between the two of them. So if you are not with the young people who are the future, you're simply going to not win any future elections. And you can see the change of tone on Wall Street with Jamie Dimon and others wanting to work with an incoming Mamdani administration in New York.
So immigration is also a very important point. Immigration enforcement has been weaponized in this lead-up. How far can the White House escalate pressure on the city without triggering political backlash?
So New York is a city of immigrants. 40%, the estimates are 40% of the population are immigrants. And therefore, attacking your population base is not going to work in the favor of the White House and its anti-immigrant racist policies.
Well, also infrastructure is another issue. So with infrastructure funding already frozen, how serious is the risk that New Yorkers pay the price for this power struggle?
Yeah, while the power struggle is there, the fact that Wall Street big players are peeling off to support the Mamdani administration could mean that even if federal funding is not available, there would be private funding available. New York is a very rich place with a lot of money, and is not beholden to federal funding alone. And if there is a rapprochement between Wall Street and the Mamdani administration for the sake of New York as the the shining city of the United States, then you could see a difference. And all of this has to yet unfold.
Professor, let's talk about the expected meeting. Could this meeting become a defining moment for Mamdani's credibility and leadership, or a trap?
It's certainly a trap, and we have to wait and see how
Why do you
Mamdani,
consider it a trap, Professor?
because we have seen what happened to Zelensky and many other world leaders who have been insulted and trapped. And I mean, I, I mean, the White House, Oval House meetings are not friendly. They're certainly not diplomatic, and we have to wait and see. But the fact of the matter is, world leaders don't have domestic support. Mamdani has domestic support, and that's the big difference.
Well, what are your expectations regarding this meeting? What would be the outcome?
I am hoping the first option, where it'll be cordial and there'll be some kind of federal local arrangement which would be to the benefit of all New Yorkers.
Would there
Because
be any compromises from both sides, Trump or Mamdani?
I think Mamdani will stick to his guns because he's on a winning ticket on affordability and economic security. Trump is actually playing defense. So it's more likely that Trump would be offering concessions to have a cordial relationship with Mamdani and his mayoral administration in New York City. It's the first time that a New York mayor is meeting one on one with the president. I mean, few previous mayors met with, you know, other mayors and had events in the White House, but this is the first kind of meeting that's taking place in the Oval Office, which shows that it's an important meeting, especially from Trump's perspective since he asked for the meeting.
And what does this signify, Professor, that Trump is the one who asked for the meeting?
It shows that he he knows that if in the current situation, if he goes into the midterm elections, if the midterm elections were to be held now, the Republicans will lose hands down. So he's scrambling to see how he can show up his administration, and this is something for us. I mean, everybody knows. I think most Republicans know that if in the midterm elections they are going to lose,
Mm-hmm.
and they are hoping to see whether they can salvage something, and this is why Trump would love to have Mamdani boxed in, and then he can crow that he has been victorious. We
Mm-hmm.
don't know how it kind of plays out.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much, Professor De Silva, for your valuable insights. Well, the fight over New York's future isn't just local, it's a preview of a national political collision over fairness, power, and who government really serves. From America's urban battleground, we move to a crisis that transcends borders, global inequality, declared an emergency by three leaders on three continents. As world leaders gather for critical climate talks in Brazil and the first ever G20 summit on African soil in Johannesburg, a stark warning has been issued. Inequality cents over every dollar created since 2000. The bottom half of humanity gets just 1 cent. Trillionaires are emerging while nearly half the world lives in poverty. Democracy, economic stability, even the climate, all are being shaken by wealth concentration. The leaders of Brazil, South Africa, and Spain call for a new international panel on inequality, a global body like the IPCC for climate to coordinate reform of tax rules, debt architecture, and also fair access to green technology. A new multilateralism is forming, one built on sovereignty and solidarity. And to explore its potential impact, we're joined by Mr. Meher Nicholas Fezli, Director of the EU ASEAN Center. Mr. Fezli, welcome to Q News. Sir, do you agree that inequality is now as urgent as a threat to climate change?
I'm delighted to join you today. Actually, we just wrapped up the 2025 World Pensions Forum here in London. So I'm jumping into the interview with you just a few minutes later. It's a pleasure to be with you. And today we discussed, with some of the world's leading pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, and finance ministers and pensions ministers for the past 2 days here in London. We discussed many themes, including that one, inequality. In our jargon, we call it SDG 1, the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, which were crafted 7-8 years ago. Ending poverty, ending hunger was supposed to be number one. And then after SDG, Sustainable Development Goal number 1, there was number 2 and number 3 and number 4, 18 of them. And the other Sustainable Development Goals were about climate, right? Climate finance, climate change, the environment, women equality. But poverty, ending poverty and hunger was supposed to be number one. And we failed. We collectively, the West, the East, the whole world failed at that objective of ending poverty and equality. Why? Because in the past 7-8 years precisely, inequality has risen, and both in the developed world. So here, Brazil and South Africa cannot really give lessons to the rest of the world, and Spain, the country of Prime Minister, because that article, which was published in the Financial Times today, was co-authored by the president of Brazil, who's hosting the COP30 summit, which is ending today. And there's another government, that of South Africa, which is hosting this G20 summit starting tomorrow morning in South Africa for the first time on African soil. And so that article they wrote together, right, the president of Brazil and the president of South Africa, together with the socialist or social democrat prime minister of Spain, Pedro Sanchez, was a way of saying, we, the socialists of Europe, we, the left in South Africa and Brazil, we know better. But in reality, it's not true, because the whole world failed. So not only the capitalist right-wing, let's say, governments of Europe or North America failed, because in America and Europe, social inequality has risen dramatically in the past 8 years, but also the so-called global South, like Brazil and South Africa, they were not able to fix it. So that problem is a universal problem. And if we're not able to fix it rapidly, it will morph into social and political upheavals.
Well, the proposal for an international panel on inequality, symbolic step. Is it a symbolic step? Is it a real potential for policy transformation? What's your take on that?
My take on that, I'm a realist, so I don't want to sound cynical. I think it's coming too little and too late. Why? Because today, in the global arena, America and China are much stronger, right? When President Trump entered the White House 9 months ago, the whole world changed. And since April, so since 7 months ago, that global Cold War, that age of geoeconomics pitting China against America is accelerating. The stakes are higher, and the accelerating rivalry between Washington and Beijing is sucking away the oxygen from the rest of the world. So it means that Britain and Europe are weaker, but even in the global South, in relative terms, everything is relative. Brazil and South Africa are relatively weaker. But, they like to believe that the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and BRICS Plus, they like to believe that this is the global South, and there is a third way, right? And that third way between, let's say, capitalism and communism is the message that the global South can give to the world. In reality, because we live in the age of geoeconomics, the only issue which really matters now is the technological financial rivalry between China and America. It's accelerating. Once again, it's sucking away the oxygen from the rest of the world. So today, a Brazilian, South African initiative backed by the socialist government of Spain, today it's not very important, with all due respect for them. And even though South Africa, which is a country, by the way, I love South Africa and I love Brazil, but I have to be realistic, their voice is difficult to be heard today because everyone is obsessed by that rivalry between America and China. And you know why? It's a rivalry across sectors, economic sectors, high tech, AI, microchips, rare earth minerals, advanced infrastructure. In all these fields, South Africa and Spain, their weight is zero. Brazil is kind of a little higher in the pecking order, but they don't weight much in that new great game, right? That techno-industrial rivalry. If anything, Russia and Saudi Arabia and South Korea are more important.
Really?
So for the likes of Xi Jinping in Beijing and Donald Trump in the White House, if anything, they care about the opinion within limits of Saudi Arabia, South Korea, Singapore, Russia, much more than that of South Africa or Spain or Brazil.
Okay, so how can developing nations ensure that reforms to the global debt system actually shift power, not just messaging?
It's going to be very difficult and very complicated. And very briefly, why? In my personal opinion, because in that new era, the number one concern of these governments, including, Spain, South Africa, Brazil, is economic growth. Economic growth, number one. Number two, debt. So debt is important, but it's below economic growth. They are obsessed by economic growth. Once again, the Chinese and the Americans are sucking away the oxygen. So the economic growth of emerging markets is going to be slower than planned initially. And of course, debt is high. And I think income inequality is third. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Fixing income inequality is number 3 or number 4 on the list. And if you do too much, so if you are Brazil or South Africa, if you do too much to fix income inequality, what will happen? Mechanically, you will slow down economic growth in your country and you will increase the debt level. Why? Because in this day and age, capital is mobile. So if you are, for example, increasing taxes on South African and Brazilian companies, if you're increasing taxes on rich people in Brazil and South Africa because you want to fix inequality, guess what will happen? These rich people, these big companies, they will go elsewhere. They will go to Argentina. They will go to Egypt. They will go to Morocco. And I think that's the problem. It's very difficult and very complicated.
Okay, so the FTP argues that inequality is a policy choice. What choices must change and who will resist?
It's a difficult policy choice because two things you can do. You can tax the rich in your own country. So you're going to say, okay, these big companies in Rio, Sao Paulo, Cape Town, they're super rich. We in Brasilia, we in the capital of Pretoria. So we in Pretoria, we in Brasilia are going to go to Johannesburg, Cape Town, Rio, Sao Paulo, where the money is. We're taxing the rich people and the rich company. Then you can tell the Westerners, you can tell, the rich countries from Europe and the US and the World Bank and the IMF, we in the South, we think we have a bad deal. You guys in Europe and America, you have it easy, you have all the money. Please be nice to us and fix the debt issue. But that in this day and age, it won't work, because in this day and age, the age of geoeconomics, the West itself, Europe, Britain, America, they have economic problems.
They are indebted.
And they are in a race against China. So they don't have money, even if they wanted to. They don't have money or time.
They have priorities
to help the South. So it's going to be very difficult and very complicated to fix equality.
Yes. Can the green transition become a vehicle for shared prosperity rather than deepening divides?
Here, I love the concept of green transition, but I think here, these are empty words.
Again.
Why are empty words? Because,
you're not optimistic about anything, Mr. May.
No, and here Brazil is smart. Brazil is very smart, because the Brazilians at the COP summit today and yesterday and the day before were under pressure by the Europeans. And the Europeans were telling them, oh, we have to transition faster. Why don't you in South America and Saudi Arabia and Egypt transition faster? And I think the Brazilians were very smart. They said, no, listen, we are a developing nation. We are blessed with natural gas and oil. I wish, me as a Brazilian, I wish we had gold and diamond, but we only have that. We only have, natural gas and oil. And we need to pump up the gas because our people are poor. Yes. And the only way for our people to get money is to benefit from fossil fuels. So sorry, Mr. Macron, sorry, Madame Ursula von der Leyen, but you do the green transition first. You don't impose your ideology abruptly on the global South. And here, I think the messaging from Brazil was good. It is important progressively to transition to a greener economy, but we should not put all the weight on the shoulder of the Arabs and the Latin Americans and the Asians, because that would not be fair, right? So I think, here Europe can take the lead, but it should not impose aggressively its constraints and norms onto the global South. So here, I support Lula, and he's absolutely right.
How should the global South leverage new alliances, BRICS plus AU and the G20, to rewrite rules dominated by the global North?
So here, once again, BRICS and EU, I don't think so, but here, yes. In the global South, you have pivot nations. What are pivot nations? They are countries with an exceptional geographic position and primary resources like natural gas, like oil, but more importantly, rare earth minerals, platinum, gold. And so these pivot nations, what are they? South Africa, Brazil, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Singapore, South Korea, they are pivot nations. Russia is a pivot nation. So they will profit. Why will they profit? Because if there is a rivalry, and there is a rivalry between America and China, and it's accelerating, they will be courted like a beautiful girl, right? So the pivot nations will be courted both by the American Prince Charming and by the Chinese Prince Charming. And what they can do, these beautiful girls, the Brazilian, Egyptian, Saudis, they can say, you know what? I'm going to be neutral. I am not going to marry you, but we're going to flirt. And so it's not a bad position to be in when you are courted by two giants, and China and America are giants, and they will have to court Egypt, Brazil, Russia, because they want rare earth minerals. They want the geographic position.
I get your point, but what are your expectations in the upcoming period? Realistic expectations, of course.
Winners and losers. So I think the accelerating race between Beijing and Washington means we will have more losers and more winners. So more countries are going to become poorer, much poorer, but you will have a few winners. And the top winners, I think, are countries like South Korea, Singapore, and Russia. They'll be like really on the top because everyone needs them. And that's why Trump wants to finish the war in Ukraine. It's not because he likes Russia or he likes Putin. And I think the European, the EU, and British experts, many of them are idiots. They don't understand what's going on here. So Trump is not there to please Putin. He couldn't care less. He's there because the geographic position of Russia is vital for America in the geo-economic rivalry with China. Russia has vast amounts of rare earth minerals, and Russia is the key nation for what we call the Northwest Passage. So the passage connecting New York and Montreal to the North Pole. And so via the North Pole, from New York and Montreal, you will have giant boats, shipping boats, connecting North America to Europe and Russia, going through the North Pole. And Russia controls the Northwest Passage. Russia is a huge country. It's like a continent. And Trump is right. In that new Cold War with China, he needs at least to be certain that Russia will remain neutral. It is not in America's interest to push Singapore or Russia or Egypt or Brazil into the arms of the Chinese. And so what Trump is doing in a very cold-blooded, neo-realist way is very smart.
Well, finally and briefly, could Johannesburg mark a geopolitical turning point, a new architecture of global governance, in your own opinion?
Here, I'm less optimistic because, you know, these terms, global governance, etc., they are from the ancient world, the old world. That world died in February of this year. So you could say it died in February of this year when Trump entered the White House, or it died in April of this year when Trump started the global tariffs realignment or war. And the new era is about selfishness. Economic nationalism, industrial nationalism at home in your own country. So if that's the new foundation of the new era, industrial and economic nationalism, it doesn't go well with global governance. Because to have a system where people believe in nice and gentle global governance, you have to have a majority of people, of important nations, who believe in it. And, you know, I'm sorry, it's not Emmanuel Macron or Ursula von der Leyen who are going to build the New World Order. That New World Order will be built by China and America. So I think global governance will be very difficult to enforce, and the norms are going to be fewer. We're going to have fewer norms, and they will be less global. They will be, by definition, more selfish, more nationalist.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Frizzley, for the critical discussion. Well, from New York to Johannesburg, the message is clear. Power is shifting, and fairness is the battleground. This has been In Focus. Until next episode, good night.